Recently, through my wife's friend, I accidentally discovered that she had been unfaithful for the past 22 years. I decided to end our marriage. My wife, 45 female, and I, 44 male, have shared 22 years of marriage, and our journey began when we were not long ago. Through a casual conversation with one of my wife's friends, I accidentally stumbled upon a devastating truth. She had been unfaithful for the past 22 years. That realization left me with no choice but to end our marriage. My wife, now 45, and I, 44, had been together for over 2 decades, our story beginning back in high school when we were just kids. She was a senior, and I was a junior, young and in love. Our relationship endured the strain of long distance when she left for college while I finished high school and completed a year at a local community college. Eventually, we found ourselves in the same city for school, and from that moment on, we were inseparable, living together, growing together, and building a life side by side. The summer after I graduated from college, we got married, and for the most part, I believed our marriage was strong, even wonderful. But that illusion shattered when I discovered the truth. During those first 2 years of college, while we were apart, she had been involved with multiple it all unraveled just after Christmas during a small get-together with some of my wife's old college friends. The evening was warm and nostalgic, filled with laughter, good food, and reminiscing about the past. At some point in the conversation, my wife casually mentioned that we had met in high school, though she conveniently left out the fact that we had been dating back then. One of her former college roommates chimed in, marveling at how incredible it was that we had met so young, gone through our wild college years, and still ended up together. I played along, chuckling as I joked that I wasn't sure my wife had been as wild as I had been. That's when things took a turn. The roommate started to share a story, but before she could get a full sentence out, my wife abruptly cut her off, saying she felt uncomfortable. Her sudden reaction set off alarms in my mind. Something wasn't right. Wanting to clear the air, I casually clarified that we had actually been together since high school and had stayed in a relationship throughout her college years. As soon as I said that, an awkward silence fell over the group, and the rest of the evening had a noticeable tension hanging over it as we were leaving. Another one of her roommates pulled me aside. With a hesitant but serious expression, she quietly suggested that I should sit down with my wife and have an honest conversation about what really happened during those college years. That single comment sent a wave of unease through me. On the drive home, I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in my gut, so I decided to ask my wife directly about what her friend had meant. She brushed it off, saying it was nothing important. But I knew better. I told her that if there was something I needed to know, now was the time to be honest. She continued to dismiss it, insisting it wasn't a big deal. Her casual attitude only deepened my suspicion. When we got home, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to let this go. I told her I'd be staying at my brother's place until she was ready to tell me the truth. The next day, she showed up looking nervous, clearly unsettled. And that's when she finally admitted it. During her first 2 years of college, she had slept with several men. She tried to downplay it, saying that at the time, she hadn't thought it was a big deal since we were long distance, and she honestly didn't expect our high school relationship to last. Her words hit me like a freight train. I was furious, hurt, blindsided. I pushed for details, needing to understand the full extent of her betrayal. That's when she confessed, it wasn't just a couple of guys. It was at least 10, and at least 3 of them were men she had introduced to me as friends during my weekend visits. One of them, she was still in contact with. Hearing that felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. A flood of emotions hit me all at once. Anger, sadness, betrayal. In that moment, I knew there was no saving our marriage. I told her I wanted a divorce and that I'd be starting the paperwork immediately. And true to my word, on January 2nd, I began the process. Her attempts to downplay what she had done, to brush off my pain like it was nothing, only reinforced my decision. This wasn't just about the cheating. It was about years of lies, about the complete lack of respect she had shown me for more than 2 decades. Her family, and even some of mine, keep telling me I shouldn't throw away our marriage over a few mistakes. They keep saying that everyone slips up, that I should find it in my heart to forgive her because of the long history we share. But to me, this isn't about a couple of mistakes. It's about a pattern of betrayal that lasted for years. She wasn't just unfaithful. She carried on affairs with multiple men for 2 whole years, and even after that, She kept some of them in our lives, introducing them as friends, standing right beside me, as if nothing had ever happened. That level of disrespect is something I can't just overlook, no matter how long ago it happened. Our kids are 18 and 20 now, basically adults. I believe they'll understand why I need to walk away from this marriage. They've seen us as a loving couple, and I hope they can see that my decision isn't about bitterness or revenge. It's about self-respect. It's about refusing to stay in a relationship where I was lied to for decades. Everywhere I turn, people keep telling me to forgive, to move past it, to focus on the good times we had. They tell me I'm being unreasonable, that I should think about everything we built together. But how can I? Every memory is tainted now. It's not just about the cheating. It's the years of deception, the way she kept these men around like nothing ever happened. How am I supposed to trust her again? How am I supposed to look at her the same way, knowing she could lie to my face for all these years and then dismiss my feelings the moment I confronted her? I keep questioning myself, wondering if I'm being too harsh, if I'm overreacting. But then I remember the sheer pain of that moment when she admitted to everything. I remember the anger, the betrayal, the nights I spent lying awake, wondering how she could introduce me to those men like they were nothing more than casual acquaintances. How she could carry on as if it didn't matter. This isn't something I can just get over. It's a fundamental, irreparable breach of trust. Am I wrong for leaving? I don't think so. At the end of the day, I feel like I'm fighting for my dignity, for my right to not be deceived and disrespected in such a profound way. This isn't about punishing her, and it's not about holding a grudge. It's about recognizing that some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. I'm writing this because my wife, along with a few of her friends, keeps insisting that what she did was normal, that in long-distance relationships, sleeping with other people is just what happens. And because I never did the same, they act like I'm the odd one out, like I was naive to think otherwise. I started to feel like I was losing my mind, like I was being gaslit into doubting everything I believed about relationships. So before this divorce is finalized, since we live in a state with a waiting period, I wanted to get an outside perspective. After looking into it, I do see a handful of people saying that casual flings during long-distance relationships aren't uncommon. But from what I can tell, they're in the minority. And even if it were common, that doesn't make it right. Not when I was committed to her, not when she let me believe we were exclusive the entire time. During those 2 years, we saw each other at least a couple of weekends a month. I was only about 3 hours away, not halfway across the country. We didn't go months without seeing each other. And as for the 3 guys she introduced me to in college, they weren't formal introductions. They were casual encounters at parties, social gatherings where I met them in passing. My wife never outright told them I was her boyfriend, so I have no idea if they even knew she was in a relationship at the time. One of those guys is still in our lives today, though not because of some secret affair. He ended up marrying a mutual friend from college, so we've both been in touch with him over the years. After I found out about my wife's infidelity, I spoke with him, needing to understand his side of the story. He told me he had no idea we were together back then. And out of respect for me, he immediately blocked my wife on social media. Some people have asked how her college roommates never figured out the truth, given that we were together that whole time. The answer lies in how we handled our wedding celebrations. My wife and I had a small, private ceremony with just close family in Texas. Later, we went back to the East Coast and threw a big party for our friends. But we skipped the usual wedding traditions, no slideshow of our love story, no speeches about how we met. Because of that, her roommates never put the pieces together. They assumed we had only started dating after we moved to the same city, which explains why they never questioned the timeline. For a while, I was open to the idea of therapy, to trying to fix things. I wanted to believe that maybe, with enough effort, we could move past this. But every time I tried to talk to her about the pain she caused, she brushed it off. She kept insisting that what she did was normal, that I was overreacting, that I was being unreasonable. The only moment she showed any real remorse was when she realized I was serious about the divorce. And even that was fleeting. Within a week, she had gone back to doubling down, acting like I was the one in the wrong. This constant back and forth is what makes me feel like I'm being gaslit. To me, it's so obvious that her actions were a deep betrayal. And yet, she and a handful of others keep trying to convince me that I'm making a big deal out of nothing. Her dismissive attitude only adds to my frustration. I've tried explaining how much her infidelity hurt me, hoping she'd finally grasp the gravity of the situation. But instead of showing understanding, she waves it off, like I'm just being dramatic over something trivial. It's as if she's rewriting the rules of our relationship and expecting me to just accept them. The constant invalidation of my feelings is maddening. I feel like I'm being manipulated into questioning my own emotions, into doubting whether I have the right to be hurt. Her refusal to acknowledge the seriousness of her actions, combined with her insistence that I'm the unreasonable one, only makes the distance between us grow wider. At this point, I need to protect myself mentally and emotionally. I can't stay in a marriage where my feelings don't matter, where my trust has been shattered beyond repair. The lack of genuine remorse, the way she keeps trying to justify it all, makes it impossible for me to see a future with her. I'm not overreacting. I'm standing up for myself, for my right to be in a relationship where I'm respected and treated with honesty. And as for a paternity test, I'm not getting one unless my kids ask for it. I have no doubt that they're mine, and even if some tests said otherwise, it wouldn't change how I feel about them. I love my kids more than anything in this world, and no matter what my wife did, that will never change. Her infidelity doesn't erase the fact that I've been their father for 19 years. They're my kids, always have been, always will be, until the day I take my last breath. And let me be absolutely clear, we were definitely in an exclusive relationship at the time. Dating culture was different back then. 20 years ago, exclusivity was the default. There wasn't this widespread idea of open relationships or casual dating like there is today. If you were with someone, it was understood that you were with them alone. Before she left for college, we had a long, emotional conversation about maintaining our relationship despite the distance. It wasn't easy, but she was adamant that we should stay together. She even joked that if I cheated on her, her dad would come after me, which, coming from her, carried a lot of weight. It showed just how seriously she took our commitment. Another clear sign was how she reacted to my senior prom. She was already away at college and couldn't attend, so I suggested going with a platonic female friend. She got upset, really upset. It was obvious how much our relationship meant to her, and that reaction reinforced that we were exclusive. I didn't want to hurt her, so I skipped prom altogether and spent the night talking with her instead. We may not have explicitly said the word exclusive, but everything about our relationship made it clear we were committed to each other. The expectation of fidelity wasn't just implied, it was understood. Then I had a conversation with the friend who initially suggested I should talk things out with my wife. She revealed something that floored me. According to her, my wife had been with at least 10 guys on the low end. And there was even a pregnancy scare during those years, something I never knew about. Honestly, the number of guys isn't even the biggest issue for me. What really matters is that my wife doesn't seem to grasp why her actions were wrong or why I feel so deeply betrayed. If she had shown even a shred of genuine remorse, if she had made any real effort to fix this, things might have been different. But she didn't. Every conversation we had about this was the same, her brushing it off, telling me I was overreacting, acting like this was all perfectly normal. She didn't express any real regret until she realized I was serious about filing for divorce. And even then, her reaction wasn't about the pain she caused, it was about the consequences she was about to face. The moment I officially started the paperwork and got a lawyer involved, she went from dismissive to defensive and angry. But it wasn't about fixing our marriage, it was about damage control. That just confirmed what I already knew. She doesn't truly understand the depth of her betrayal. This isn't just about the cheating itself. It's about how she continues to dismiss my feelings, as if all those years of deception and disrespect mean nothing. How do you rebuild something when the person who broke it refuses to acknowledge the damage? At this point, I have no choice but to move forward. Thankfully, co-parenting shouldn't be too difficult. Our kids are older, and I've been saving for their college and post-high school expenses for years. There's no major custody battle to worry about, and financially, we're both stable. I'm open to therapy, but at this point, it wouldn't be to save the marriage, it would be to figure out how to effectively co-parent and find some kind of closure. I've already taken the necessary steps to separate. I hired a lawyer, had an intent to separate document drafted, and sent it to her via certified mail. It's not an official divorce filing yet, but it's the first step. It also gives her the chance to hire her own lawyer if she wants to contest anything. As for living arrangements, I haven't fully moved out yet. I've been staying at my brother's place while figuring out something more permanent. Regarding the timeline, everything escalated quickly. The dinner with her friends happened on the 26th, and that night, I went to my brother's house to cool off and give her some space. Over the next 4 or 5 days, we had multiple conversations, but it became painfully clear that she didn't think she had done anything wrong. If she had shown even an ounce of remorse, if she had taken responsibility or acknowledged my pain in any meaningful way, I might have reconsidered. I might have at least taken more time to process things. But her dismissive attitude made my decision for me. So, I found a divorce lawyer and had the standard intent to separate agreements drafted and sent that same day. We're not legally divorced yet, and I'm not even sure if my state has an official concept of legal separation. But that doesn't change anything. I've made it clear that this is happening, and I've already taken the first steps. What I discovered about her college years. After a few counseling sessions and some conversations with two of her former roommates, more pieces of the puzzle started falling into place. Her roommates had suspected something was going on back in college, but they never had concrete proof. They told me that things just seemed off. It was obvious that whatever was happening wasn't innocent. One of them explained why she never brought it up before. Apparently, my wife had told her college friends that she and I had gone through some wild times back then but had worked things out before getting married. Because of that, none of them ever felt the need to question it or tell me anything. The same roommate who pulled me aside at dinner admitted that she felt uncomfortable about the whole situation, that she didn't think my wife had been honest with me. That's why she spoke up. She thought I deserved to know. As for the men my wife was involved with, I've learned that some of those introductions weren't even intentional. One of the guys she slept with ended up dating and eventually marrying a mutual friend of ours from college. That's the same guy she stayed in contact with all these years. In our counseling sessions, my wife initially tried to shift the blame onto me. She suggested that I had somehow pushed her into these situations. But after pressing her, she finally admitted it was wrong. She also acknowledged that when I visited her in college, she usually planned for us to stay in her room or spend time alone, almost as if she was trying to keep me away from certain people. None of this changes the reality of what she did, and none of it makes me second-guess my decision. If anything, it only solidifies what I already knew. She made a choice to betray me, and now she refuses to take real responsibility for it. I'm done questioning myself. I'm done letting her rewrite history. And I'm done letting anyone tell me that I should just forgive and forget. This marriage is over. And I'm finally at peace with that. I wanted to experience college parties since I had missed out on that during high school and community college. She never expected me to run into the guys she had been with, but they often showed up at these parties, and she felt like she couldn't avoid it. While I still think it was incredibly disrespectful, I suppose it's slightly less egregious than if she had deliberately paraded me in front of them. The whole situation has been a tangled web of half-truths and omissions, which has made it all the more difficult to process. Her friends had their suspicions but never said anything, and my wife managed to keep up this facade for years. Most of our therapy sessions have focused on why I see her infidelity as a deep betrayal while she doesn't. At first, she rationalized her actions by insisting that none of these men were in relationships with her. They were mostly one-night stands or casual friends with benefits. In her mind, that made it less significant since there wasn't any emotional attachment. Those were her words, not mine. But from my perspective, the nature of the relationships was irrelevant. We never agreed that this kind of behavior was acceptable. In fact, she actively discouraged me from doing the same. The double standard was glaring, which only amplified my sense of betrayal. As we continued discussing this over 2 therapy sessions, and after she consulted some friends, my wife began to see things differently. She now acknowledges that what she did was a breach of trust, and that it damaged the foundation of our relationship. This shift in understanding has allowed us to move from heated arguments to more honest, productive conversations. While I no longer believe our marriage can be saved, this new level of communication gives me hope that we can at least co-parent effectively. That's what matters most, for our kids and for navigating this new reality. Why I'm 100% committed to divorce. 2 key revelations made it crystal clear that I needed to end this marriage for good. First, about 10 years ago, we went through a rough patch and spent nearly 2 years without any intimacy. She told me that our physical relationship had become monotonous, so I tried to add some excitement. Nothing extreme, just some light role play and a few things from a novelty store. But it turned out she was fixated on certain experiences from her college years, ones she wasn't comfortable discussing with me. She wanted me to recreate those experiences, but when I did, it made her feel awkward and guilty because it reminded her of other men she had been with. That was a gut punch. She insists those encounters were meaningless, yet they still have enough power over her to impact our marriage a decade later. That tells me they were far more significant than she's willing to admit. Second, she recently confessed to flirting with coworkers during business trips since the pandemic ended. She claims nothing physical happened, but it reached the point where she actually went on a date with one of her male colleagues. For me, that was the final straw. These revelations shattered any last bit of trust one had left. The first issue showed me that she's still haunted by her past, no matter how much she downplays it. The second proved that she was willing to push boundaries again, even after everything we had been through. Those two factors combined made it impossible for me to believe that our marriage was salvageable. We have now informed our children that we're getting a divorce. We explained that it stemmed from some bad decisions made during college, decisions we haven't been able to move past. During the conversation, my 19-year-old, who's currently in college, directly asked if I had ever been unfaithful while my wife was away at school. That question caught her off guard. But to her credit, she admitted to our kids that she was the one who cheated. Beyond that, we both agreed not to share any further details. There's no reason to expose them to the more painful aspects of our past. What matters most is reassuring them that, despite the separation, we are both fully committed to being there for them. I emphasize that we are in therapy to ensure we handle the divorce in the healthiest way possible for our family. I also made it clear that if they ever need to talk, whether with us or a therapist, they have my full support. I want them to know they can express their feelings and seek help without hesitation. Their emotional well-being is our top priority, and we're doing everything we can to navigate this transition together as a family. We've already started discussions with a mediator to figure out the best path forward. Unless something changes, it looks like we'll be able to part ways amicably. We're both financially stable. Neither of us has major debts, and with our kids being older, custody isn't a big issue that I'm managing. Honestly, I'm grateful that my last post got so much attention. It validated my feelings and pushed me to seek counseling with my wife. To be fair, my 19-year-old daughter has had her share of difficult relationships. She's been hurt by boyfriends who either cheated on her or abruptly left her for someone else. Given her experiences with untrustworthy men, it makes sense why her first thought might have been that I was the one who cheated. On top of that, I was the one who left the house, and in her eyes, seeing her father walk out probably felt like an admission of guilt. Her past has shaped her perspective, making it easier for her to assume I was at fault. When the topic of cheating came up, though, my wife didn't hesitate to admit that she was the one who had been unfaithful. To be honest, I'm not overly concerned about controlling the narrative. From what I can tell, my wife hasn't said anything negative about me to our kids. Besides, given her recent admissions, flirting, past infidelity, and the fact that she was so quick to agree to a joint, amicable divorce after just 6 weeks and 3 counseling sessions, it's clear she was more prepared to move on than I was. That part stings a little. She seems to be having an easier time walking away from a 20-year marriage than I am. And, if I had to guess, she's probably already looking for someone new. During our meeting with the divorce mediator, she made a point of stating that we're still legally married until the divorce is finalized and that any infidelity before that could jeopardize our settlement. The irony of that statement didn't escape me, considering that infidelity is what led to this divorce in the first place. She looked visibly annoyed when the topic came up. I also suspect that my current living situation, still crashing in the guest room, is making it harder for her to move on as quickly as she'd like. At the end of the day, I'm doing my best to come to terms with the end of our marriage. I've been attending therapy on my own, in addition to our couples sessions, to help me process everything. I'm also mentally bracing myself for the possibility of running into that coworker she only went on a date with. But hopefully, I'll have my own place before the divorce is finalized. If everything goes smoothly with the mediator, we should be legally divorced by summer. By then, I'll be settled in my own space, and she can date whoever she wants. My wife and I have officially finalized our divorce. It's done. We managed to have an uncontested, amicable divorce with minimal disagreements. Our lawyers worked through mediation to draft the settlement, and a judge signed off on it a few weeks ago. Ultimately, the process was pretty straightforward. The only significant complication involved our 17-year-old son, who was adamant about staying with me due to his strained relationship with his mother. At first, my ex-wife resisted. She was prepared to challenge the uncontested divorce and fight for custody. But our son made it clear she could either give him a few months to process things and try to rebuild their relationship at his own pace, or she could force him to stay with her against his will until he turned 18 and risk never seeing him again. I thought his stance was a bit harsh, but it did make her back down. In the end, we agreed that I would have primary physical custody until his birthday later this year. I've been encouraging him to stay open to mending his relationship with his mother. Despite what she did before he was born, she cared for and loved him for 17 years. And lately, I've noticed him spending more time with her, which gives me hope that they'll be able to work through things. This has been a difficult time for all of us, but I'm optimistic that, with time, they'll rebuild their bond. I didn't, so she kept the house and most of the furnishings. To balance things out, she took out a mortgage to pay me back for half of the equity and half of the estimated replacement value of the furniture. Most of our other belongings were easy to split. She kept her car, I kept mine, and we divided our personal items like my music gear and her hobby equipment, along with clothing and personal effects. For anything that was harder to divide, we agreed to sell it and split the profits. Thankfully, a few years ago, we had documented most of our valuable items and electronics for an insurance rider we added to our home policy, which made the process much smoother. Things have been going well for me personally. Both of my kids spend most of their time at my place, and we've maintained a close relationship, which was my biggest concern throughout the divorce. I'm relieved and grateful that this bond remains strong. I've moved into a new house that truly feels like a fresh start. And, in a bit of a midlife crisis move, I traded in my old minivan for a sleek Lexus LC500, a decision that, to my surprise, has brought me a ridiculous amount of joy. On another positive note, a woman from work, someone from a different department, so there's no professional awkwardness, invited me out for a coffee date. I was upfront with her, letting her know that I'm not ready to date just yet. She was incredibly understanding and even offered to take a rain check, saying she'd be happy to go out whenever I feel ready. It was a pleasant surprise. She's smart, funny, and easy to talk to, and just knowing that someone is interested feels good. My ex and I are still attending couples counseling, but now it's focused on closure and co-parenting, rather than salvaging our marriage. These sessions have been invaluable for processing everything and ensuring that we can maintain a positive, healthy environment for our kids despite the circumstances. At the same time, these sessions have only reaffirmed that divorce was the right decision. It's become clear through our conversations that my wife started dating as soon as we began the divorce process, which just confirms that whatever love we had was already fading. I'm fairly certain that the coworker she always insisted was just a friend was the one who dropped her off at our last session. Surprisingly, though, it didn't really upset me. If anything, it was just more proof that I, too, was ready to move on. Healing from the betrayal will take time, but I feel like I'm making real progress. I can confidently say that this was the right choice. I've shed more tears in the past 4 months than I have in the last 20 years combined, but for the past month, I've genuinely started to feel good about myself for the first time in a long while. I'm enjoying my independence, staying busy helping my 17-year-old prepare for college in the fall, and looking forward to grabbing coffee with a smart, funny woman in a month or two. Going through this divorce has taught me the true value of honest communication. Looking back, I wish we had been more transparent with each other from the start. Maybe that could have saved us from some of the pain we both ended up feeling. It's a lesson I'll carry with me in every relationship moving forward, romantic or otherwise. Most importantly, I've realized that no matter how painful things get, I have the strength to rebuild and move forward. And for the first time in a long time, I'm finally feeling like myself again.